Hey everyone, it's Shigwen. I know it's been a long time since my last video, but I didn't have a lot of free time the past few months. But I'm finally back online. I started playing Hearthstone recently and managed to get my 12 wins in a row in Arena. So I started giving a lot of tips on my blog already, and in this video I will try to underline the importance of early game pressure. This is an Arena game I recorded shortly after I managed to get my 12 wins. I will try to show you the correct plays in order to help you improve and win more games in Arena. First of all, as I always recommend when you are the second player, you must use your coin turn 1 or turn 2 and try to put as much pressure as possible and as soon as possible. Here I had no good card to play turn 1 with my coin, so I kept it for the second turn and summoned my Ghost Wolves. My opponent didn't have a minion to play turn 2 and was forced to use his passive. Since I didn't have a searing totem in my hand, I didn't want to use my coin just to summon a random totem. It was really safer to summon the Ghost Wolves here. At this point I knew I would dominate the early and mid game. When you can play strong minions early game and your opponent cannot, you are obviously in a very good position. Not being able to play cards early just because you have expensive cards in your hand is something you must try to avoid when you are creating your deck in Arena. This is why at least half of your deck in Arena must be cards you can play in turn 1, 2 or 3. If you cannot play anything in the first 3 turns, you will most likely lose the game. Alright, now I'm just killing his minion with a rock biter. I couldn't do anything else anyway. And at this point you have to know that my opponent doesn't know what to do in order to react. He will have to use his blasts on my minions, and the blasts for a paladin are quite expensive. He has to use all his mana just to kill one wolf. And you will see that I will stay ahead the entire game, because he doesn't have any strong AoE like a mage to clean my entire board. He maybe didn't have the cards to one-shot everything with Consecration. So with the hand I had right now, I mean, we are turn 4, I knew the game was won. If he had anything in order to react, he would have used it already. The best thing for him would have been to play Sentient Shield Master turn 4 to counter my wolves, but he didn't. When he played his Fen Creeper turn 5, it was the only moment I had to hesitate a lot during this game, because if he couldn't play anything in early game, it was probably because his hand was full of big creatures. So I was hesitating to hex the Fen Creeper to maintain the pressure, because I feared he would use like a very strong minion, maybe a legendary card I could not counter. So I was hesitating, but I was like, keeping the pressure is the most important thing to do at this point, and maybe I can just kill him even if he summons strong cards, as long as I kill the walls. So I decided to go all in and to use my hex. I admit that it was a bit risky, but I didn't have to regret it in the end. The chances to get a very strong legendary card in an arena game are quite low, and I was confident I could kill him before we actually reached the late game where he can start being a problem. Now, as you can see, I have a lot of minions I could play from my hand, and I was hesitating a bit, but I wanted to keep my Argent Commander, because I wanted to use it as an element of surprise, because he can charge and kill a problematic minion on the opponent board. I didn't want to use expensive cards because I wanted to keep spamming my totems and bait his AoE as much as possible. So in the end, the best play was to play a Sentient Shield Master in my opinion, and keep my Fire Elemental for the battle cry, just in case I would need it to kill a minion. You must know that he used his Blessing of Wisdom on one of my minions, so every time I attack with my wolf, he will draw a card. But since his hand is full, and we are not trying to top deck the best card at the moment, well, I'm just trying to put as much pressure as possible and deal as much damage as I can, I don't really care about him drawing a card when I attack. But I will sacrifice this minion as soon as I can, before it becomes a problem. Do not forget, especially when you play Shaman, that you cannot have more than 7 minions on your board. So when you keep spamming your totems all the time, as I was doing in this game, I still had to make sure I had room to place more minions. As you can see, the pressure I put in early game helped me dominate the entire game. In the end, the minions I put on the second turn, I mean the Feral Spirit I summoned, is still here on turn 7. Since I am the one attacking the minions he summons every turn, and I can decide which minion will be traded for which one, I can use the heal from my totem to always keep my minions alive but low HP, so they will heal I can decide to sacrifice the minions that are useless, or I can just decide to make room for stronger. I am the one deciding the flow of the game. I am the one who decides what happens, which minion will die, and so on. And this is only because I put pressure early game and he did not play a minion turn 2. This made all the difference. If you master the early game and the mid game, you will win the late game all the time. You have to understand this to win more arena game. The early game is very, very important. At this point, even if he managed to clean my entire board, I still had very strong cards in my hand. So whatever happened, I could handle the situation. If my opponent put more pressure early game, he would have managed to force me to use those cards. I would have been forced to use my fire elemental to kill his minions, or maybe I would have been forced to use more walls early game to defend against his minions, but it wasn't the case, so I could keep everything to burst him down at the last second. Now, another thing you can see is that my opponent didn't choose very good cards when he created his deck. He has Holy Light, the Paladin Heal, which is quite a bad card, and all he can do in his turn 8 or 9 is to spam spells that will not change the tides of the game in his favor. He is only trying to slow down his inevitable fate. During the first turns, when he was not playing anything, I suppose that he would actually have very expensive cards in his hands, and this was why he was not playing anything in the early game, that he would keep everything for the late game. But now that we finally arrive in late game and he is not using anything useful to counter me, I'm just thinking that his deck is actually very, very bad. Now that I see what my opponent is playing and I know that his deck is bad, I think that the chances for him to draw an AoE at this point is quite low. So I'm confident in myself, and now I know I can summon my tiger and he will not die with my entire board if my opponent uses an AoE, because if he had one, he would have used it already. So I'm preparing my board to burst him down. It's not time to control anymore, it's time to kill. Even if I had stronger and more expensive cards in my hand than my Jungle Panther, I also knew that it was a stealth minion that would most likely survive unless killed by an AoE. If I summon my Fen Creeper or my Fire Elemental, I feared that he would destroy them either with blasts or maybe reduce their attack, with Allo Safekeeper or things like this. So I really felt that even if the minion I played was cheaper than the rest of the minions in my hand, it was the correct play. And now, as you can see, I am killing him with the right amount of damage, which means that if I summon my Fen Creeper instead of my Panther, I would not have killed him this turn, so it was indeed the correct play. So you must always remember to take all the risks into account, to think about the cards your opponent could play, could draw. You must anticipate everything, the AoE, try to keep cards in your hands, try to use your totem smartly, and if you do this correctly, normally you should win a lot of games in Arena with Shaman.